You know, John Lithgow is a fantastic actor, but doesn't he have the most punchable face when he plays a baddie? He does for me anyway. You guys, oh my gosh, this movie. He's great. He did great in here as well. But there's just, like, he's just got this face. When he plays a baddie, it's just like everything about his face is amplified and not in a good way. And he knows it too. I mean, he uses his face as part of his entire character when he plays parts like this. I'm speaking of The Rule of Jenny Penn, which is a movie I found out about a couple months ago. One of my brothers told me about it. I had not heard of it. And then I saw that it was hitting theaters this weekend, so I decided to go see it Saturday night before we finally get daylight savings time back. I have mixed thoughts about this film. I don't hate it. I think it's worth a watch, especially if you like John Lithgow, Jeffrey Rush. Those two men, it was really interesting to see their performances in here and how they played off of each other. I don't know if I've ever seen them in a movie together, and especially at their age, right now, given where the story takes place and the characters, it was interesting to see them play these parts at the time in their life that they are now. So let me just tell you a little bit about this movie. It's an IFC film, and it's going to be coming to Shudder apparently because the Shudder logo showed up at the very beginning of it. It is apparently based on a short story written by Owen Marshall. It has almost like a Stephen King vibes. In fact, I wondered if this was something that he had written, but no, something written by somebody else. The scenario is Jeffrey Rush plays a judge who has had a stroke, and he ends up in this, like a home for old people, almost like a nursing home, but also an elder care facility where, well, there's different levels of care. Some are more independent, but others need more care. And Jeffrey Rush is at the point where, because of his stroke, he needs a little bit more care, but he's still kind of mobile. He can get up, but he doesn't have function in one side of his body. He can operate his wheelchair. And he starts to notice that there's a resident there at the facility who is causing all sorts of problems, and he has a really nasty streak. And this is the character played by John Lithgow. And he walks around with this puppet, and he terrorizes the people in this facility with this puppet, and the puppet is Jenny Penn. It was interesting to see this story play out and the different emotions that it generated in me. Partly because the scenario, the setup, the characters, it takes place in this old folks' home, really doesn't shy away from the very sober reality of what awaits many of us. It will, like, let's say, especially if we get to the point where we have to be in a facility like that. And it was sad to see these people, these old people at the end of their life, nothing really much to live for. A lot of them almost just seemed like robotic, just being led along, doing this and doing that, these little dances, these little things they watch on the TV, just sitting there almost like little zombies. And it was sad. And also to see the character of Jeffrey Rush, how far he had fallen, because he'd been this big judge, and then here he was reduced to this, someone having to give him baths. It was kind of pitiful, it was sad, it was sobering, and a little scary too, to see the utter dependency that some people have at the end of their life to be taken care of by people that aren't their family, people that aren't their loved ones. Like maybe these are people that don't have anybody. So that was an interesting mix of emotions that I had when I was watching it, because also on top of that, you've got this little tailhole running around being just a very vile person to the different residents. I mean, he terrorizes them on a regular basis. And it basically, the character of Jeffrey Rush and the character of John Lithgow, they come head to head, because Jeffrey Rush has this very, like, he's not going to put up with that crap. And you see that John Lithgow's character views this as a challenge. He is going to break this man. And so that's basically what the story is. I think the runtime is like 1 hour and 41 minutes. While I did appreciate the performance of both of the men, I especially like Jeffrey Rush, the way he played a stroke victim, and then whatever they did to his face. I think by the time the movie was towards the end, and he was getting progressively worse with his physical condition. By then it was a little obvious that they had something on his face, some sort of prosthetic that was pulling his face down or whatever, like a mask or something. But in the beginning, whatever they did it was minor, but you could still tell, like his eye was kind of drooped like this and hit the side of his face. I thought that was pretty well done. I also liked, as I've mentioned before, the performance of John Lithgow is so freaking creepy, walking around with this stupid puppet on his hand, and he's really, really tall. John Lithgow is probably like 6'4" or 6'5", and so he's towering over these frail old people, and he's frail himself because he's not a spring chicken. But yet he was just like running around and doing all sorts of terrible stuff and stealing things and having access to various parts of the facility, and he was just up to no good. There was really not much good about this guy at all. So not a very nuanced character, in other words. Very easy to just absolutely despise him. If I had any cons, well, I do have some cons. One, it feels a bit too long. Like I said, it's an hour and 41 minutes, something like that, which isn't terribly long, but here's where I'm getting around to that part of it. Some of the situations that it would show John Lithgow doing and the shenanigans he's up to and all the different times he's terrorizing the people, it started to feel a little bit repetitive. And it seems like they probably could have trimmed out maybe about 5+ minutes of that. And this would have been, it probably would have felt not quite as draggy because we were seeing these same things over and over. It was just like, okay, well, let's kind of get to the point where we're going to have, the final act, the climax of the film. Let's get to that. So that I feel like was something that the movie could have benefited from a little bit more trimming down. Some other things that kind of got on my nerves was they're in this facility. And yes, you could say this kind of is driving home the point that there's not enough people around to take care of these patients, but the staff was plentiful enough. And I get that there will be some moments that they're not going to be on top of something, but you don't get the sense that this is a facility that is negligent or abusive or anything like that. The staff seems to care for the people, they're patient, they don't treat them bad or anything like that. I mean, in the case of this story, it's not about patient abuse, it's about another patient bullying the rest of the patients. But the staff never seemed to notice when he was doing stuff, and he's just like going all around doing all sorts of stuff. And there will be times where, okay, he would go in a room and some people are by themselves with him, but some stuff happened at one point and there was just a whole bunch of yelling and noise and cacophony, and it was like it took people forever to hear it and come running. That felt a little bit not realistic to me. And this was something that happened multiple times where he's going into people's rooms and he's doing things. And another thing that bothered me was pretty much all of the patients there were too afraid to stand up to him or even say anything to the staff. And while I get that a lot of people can feel very intimidated by bullies and not want to say anything, everybody else in the facility except for Jeffrey Rush's character didn't want to speak up. That was a little agitating. I get that's part of the frustration of the story. You're supposed to feel agitated, but it did feel to me like those situations were a little unrealistic, and it was frustrating because I'm like, they don't see him just like doing these things. And there is one part in the movie where you see that he's very stealthy in the way he's doing stuff, but I still find it hard to believe that in all the years he'd been at this facility, and you do come to understand that he's been there for a while, nobody caught him doing anything, not once, ever. And that was a bit frustrating. But it wasn't anything that was enough to hold me back from enjoying this film. I felt like it was worth a watch, if not just for the performance of the two leads. It was interesting to watch them. They did a great job. And also, if you like psychological horror / suspense types of movies, I would recommend checking this out. I don't know when it's going to be on Shudder, but probably shortly. Anyway, I liked the film enough that I wanted to talk about it, but I don't think I have anything else to say right now about The Rule of Jenny Penn. If you guys happen to check it out, curious to hear your thoughts on it. Okay, you guys, that's it for this one. Adios.